In my last video, I flew to Tampa to meet with the owners of a healthcare company that was up for sale. Then I got to thinking, buying a business is not something usually spoken about, and wanted to share the steps of buying a business and why buying a business could be the right move for someone like you. This is an exciting topic for me because I personally wish I knew this information 15 years earlier in my career. It's a great way of building wealth and passive income. Imagine buying a business that gave you a profit of $500,000 a year. What would you do with that passive income? Who would you be if you replaced the need to work for money and instead had your money working for you? Let me know right in the comment section down below what that life would look like. Here on ENTP Life, I mostly talk about real estate and business, which have been my pathway for achieving financial freedom, allowing me to do more of what I love. If you're looking for a way to break from the rat race and live your dreams, like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing. My name is Carl Pierre, and this is ENTP Life. If you're interested in healthcare entrepreneurship, business, or real estate investing, you can book a one-on-one mentoring session with me or sign up for one of my courses where I share the details of how I've built an 8-figure business and real estate portfolio. The links for my programs, Killing the American Dream and Passive Workforce, are also in the description down below. When buying a business, there's a lot to consider. However, buying a business is a lot like buying things that you've already purchased in your life. The same logic and rules apply, and if you think about it in this way, you'll be less anxious about taking the steps as an investor of this type. I know sometimes it seems like I try to make things seem a lot simpler than they really are. To be fair, this is not simple at all, but it's not impossible. If you're not the quitting type, these steps can have you on your way to owning your own business that someone else built. The very first step in this process is a self-audit. If you don't know who you are, like really know who you are, you're gonna have a tough time doing anything that requires courage, discipline, and persistence. Let me explain. Now, in this self-audit, it's really important for you to identify your strengths and weaknesses, the skill sets that you have, and the knowledge base and the experience that you have in your work life. All of these things are going to help narrow down what sort of business you should be buying. So my strengths naturally are to solve problems, take on risk. I am not so squeamish when it comes to taking risks, which is a good natural thing for me to have being an entrepreneur. And I would also say another strength that I have is that I'm able to connect abstract ideas relatively quickly. But I do have some weaknesses that are not conducive to running businesses. I'm highly disorganized in my personal life. I take on way too much responsibility. I lose interest very quickly. And in knowing these weaknesses, I'm able to build teams where people don't have those same weak points, right? So having this self-audit of identifying your strengths and weaknesses allows you to know exactly what you're dealing with so that you're able to somewhat complement your personal skill sets and your traits so that you don't have those weaknesses and you're kind of approaching this a little stronger. Also, you need to think about what relevant experience do you have in this particular business that you're looking into, right? So let's just say that you were a hotel manager and you ran hotels for Marriott, for Hilton, 100-bed, 200-bed sort of facilities, and you know the ins and outs, everything, the staffing ratios, etc. You might have the skill sets and the background to think about buying hotels. Or you could be an accountant and you have strong financial abilities, and that's going to lend to maybe developing the metrics or helping you even evaluate deals. So you really have to do this self-audit, list out what your strengths and weaknesses are, what skills that you've acquired through education and through the workplace, and then what industry group are you really comfortable with and familiar with, because that's going to allow you to make decisions a whole lot better. The next step is identifying an industry or business that you feel matches who you are. Now, using me as an example, my entire life has been healthcare. Healthcare staffing, home healthcare. I went to college for healthcare and management. I got a concentration in radiological studies. So I did X-ray, CT, MRI, those sort of things. So if I were looking at businesses, which I do all the time, I'd be looking within that vertical, right? I'd either be looking at healthcare staffing companies that are either approaching an area, either by geography that I'm interested in, or they just have a well-managed business that is interesting to me. Or I'd look at imaging centers, or I would look at other healthcare or home healthcare companies. So I try to align myself with industries that I understand and industries that will work for me, rather than get into something that's completely unfamiliar, like chemical manufacturing. I have no idea what that would look like, and I would be going into that blind. So once you do that self-audit and you've identified that you have this particular skill set or knowledge base, that's going to help you choose what sort of business is in line with that. Again, I use the example of a hotel manager. A hotel manager might look at buying hotels, but they also may look at the short-term rental industry and start buying up Airbnb houses, right? So really, once you do that self-audit and you've identified the industry, it kind of makes it easier. So you're kind of building on top of this thought pattern. Step 3, search for businesses that are listed on business broker websites or prospect your own leads. So in my pursuits, there's a few sites that I visit that I look for business listings. You could actually just Google the sort of businesses that you're interested in for sale, and you'll get a list of different business brokers. But some of the sites that I work off of for healthcare staffing, home healthcare, and healthcare businesses are vested. Really don't like them, but they do have a lot of listings throughout the country. There's another company that I work with called American Healthcare Capital. It sounds like a funding company, but they're all about mergers and acquisitions within the healthcare space. They have tons of listings throughout the country. And another personal broker that I work with very closely is a guy by the name of Jay Inbar, and his group is called the Inbar Group. That's INBAR. Very nice guy, very sharp, out of New York. He does deals mostly in the Northeast, so you can check out his site as well, see what companies he has listed, and those are the sort of places where you can source your own deals. Now, if you're going to actually go out there and prospect your own deals, that process is a lot like any other cold calling sort of sequence. You're going to list out what sort of companies, go to directories, whether it's Department of Health listings or a directory of businesses in some sort of yellow pages that is in the industry group that you're targeting, and start making phone calls. Call and ask to speak to the manager, call and ask to speak to the owner, send mailers that you're interested in buying their business. Do whatever you can to get the decision makers on the phone. Present yourself as being interested in this business. Sometimes business owners aren't at the phase where they've been represented by a broker, but they are potentially considering selling their business. So you might want to just go out there, reach out to them, and kind of drive your own leads in that way. It might allow you to negotiate a little bit better now that you don't have a broker in between, but there's going to be more work involved on that end. It's almost like prospecting an off-market deal in real estate versus something that's listed on the MLS, right? There's going to be some more potential on a unlisted deal for yourself than there is on a listed deal. Step 4, review, understand, and learn about how to evaluate financials. This will help you understand company valuations, performance, and how to sniff out a good deal. Now, step 4 is probably the most intimidating and hardest step for most people, unless they already have a strong financial background. What do I mean by a strong financial background? I'm talking about the CPAs out there, those who've worked on the controller level, CFO level of companies. They will be very comfortable reviewing financials, but the average person who's never seen corporate financials may be intimidated by just reviewing a full financial statement. And if you don't have a strong background in financials or accounting, the best thing for you to do is probably seek a consultant, typically a CPA or a business broker of some kind, and have them walk you through what you should be looking for, what are the high points, the low points, things that should concern you. The main things are going to be the quality of earnings and the quality of the revenue itself. What is the true cash flow of this company? Looking at the operating expenses, understanding the add backs and seller's discretionary earnings to try to come up with the true number and how much money this company has made in the last year or maybe even the last 5 years to really understand what are the cycles and what is the true potential for this company and where you could potentially extract more value. Looking at financials from this perspective is going to allow you to apply maybe the industry standard multiple for that sort of business so that you're able to come up with a price point for what this company should really be worth on the private market. Step number 5 is you have to figure out the money. You need to know and secure how you're going to pay for this deal. Obviously, if you're buying a business, typically in the multi-million-dollar range, you're going to need money to make that deal happen. Now, typically, These sort of acquisitions are done with a combination of cash, debt, and a seller's note, all right? And I'll kind of explain each piece. So the cash component or the equity component is gonna be the cash that you infuse into that deal. So that's usually gonna be anywhere from 10% on the low side to as high as 30% or even higher depending on what sort of debt you're securing. Now the debt portion is something that you should be clearly familiar with. That's gonna be the amount that you borrow from a bank to fill in the gap. So let's just say you're doing a $5 million purchase, right? If you just use a 20% standard, which is gonna be $1 million, maybe the bank only will lend you $3 million on this particular deal. So you're gonna have a shortfall of $1 million. You're gonna have a few options at that point. Either you're gonna have to come up with more cash, right, from your equity contribution, or you're gonna be able to negotiate maybe a seller's loan or a seller's note to get you to the full $5 million amount. Either way, you're gonna have to go through this process of sourcing capital, right, from a lender, sourcing capital from people, equity investors, and really getting creative with your financing goals when dealing with the seller. Some people will try to get a bigger seller's note, but typically sellers don't like that. They'd rather have their cash for their business today. It's better to have, $4 million today with a $1 million note than $1 million today and a $4 million note, right? Because ultimately you're gonna be running that business and taking over. If you nosedive it, they don't get paid, right? So those are the sort of things that you have to think about when it comes to money. Also, you could try to raise money entirely to do the whole deal, but that's less likely and less attractive to investors. It's better to leverage up using debt, and you're gonna be able to, manage the cash flow of that company, service your debt, and still have a nice take for yourself. After you have the money sources figured out, it's time to move on to step 6, which is making offers. Once you've isolated a business that you liked, you review the financials and it all makes sense, and you're pretty confident that you have your money squared away, people have promised that they'll either contribute to the deal, banks have pre-approved you and that sort of thing, it's time for you to start making offers. When you make an offer on a business, it's a lot like making an offer on a property. So you're gonna write up some sort of offer agreement. You might need to get an attorney to assist you with this, but you're gonna create like a letter of intent to purchase or just a standard purchase agreement that says you're looking to purchase this asset or this business at a certain price. You have a certain time for your due diligence and research period. You're going to be using X source of capital. You plan on executing the deal within a certain amount of time. And those are the standard terms, right? Like, how much are you paying? How are you paying for how are you paying for the asset? And then, how do you expect to pay for the deal? What are the terms of the transition? Is this a share purchase or just an asset purchase? Those details are going to be ironed out in this initial offer letter, okay? Get assistance from an attorney on this if this is your first time doing it. And sometimes the business brokers may have a template for you to use and may ask you these specific questions to help put together the offer letter. But once you've got all those pieces together and you found something that you like, that's the typical process of putting together an offer. Step 7 can only happen once you have an accepted offer. Step 7 is your due diligence process. Due diligence is probably the hardest part of this entire sequence. The main reason for that is because you're about to lay out a lot of money, take on a lot of responsibility to own this business. So you need to make sure that you're buying the right sort of business. Your due diligence process is going to probably include the review of dozens of documents, contracts, years of financial statements, years of bank statements. You're going to have to hire attorneys, both from an employment standpoint, maybe asset attorneys or specialized attorneys for your industry. You're going to need to hire an accountant to help you really audit the financials of that company if they're not already audited. You're going to need to do like quality of earning reviews. So it's a big chunk of this process, and usually it's going to take anywhere from 60 days to 150 days, depending on the state of the financials and the state of the information for that company. It's a heavy lift for you to do the due diligence. It's also a heavy lift for the sellers because they have to put together all these things. My due diligence list is like 5 tabs on an Excel spreadsheet and maybe 30 items per tab, all right? So these are state licenses, the original certificate of corporation, the board minutes and meeting minutes, all kinds of things. But it's typically broken out to a few different areas. It would be legal, operations, IT, financials, and licenses and somewhat industry-specific things. And within those main areas are subcategories that allow me to make my decisions, all right? So operations may include things like their policy and procedures manual, organization chart. It will definitely also include performance evaluations on employees, employee files. It's really a lot, right? So you're gonna have to go through this process of reviewing all these items to make sure everything is in order. And it's really also your opportunity to back out of the deal or renegotiate a deal based upon what you find, all right? So just make sure that you get some help in this due diligence process. And obviously, if you're intimately knowledgeable of this area, you know what sort of things to look out for. Step 8, finalize and close the deal. The closing process is really just a dance of the banks, accountants, and legal, all right? It's annoying, like all closings, if you've ever been through a real estate closing, multiple parts, multiple parties, signing off all kinds of indemnifications and protecting their relative interest in that deal. The bank wants to make sure that all I's are dotted, all T's are crossed, and they're going to be on the hook for the majority of the spend. So they have their process. Your attorneys and both your personal attorneys plus the bank's attorneys are going to be ironing out the details along with the seller's attorneys. It's a huge dance of personalities, egos. Usually when buying a business, this is not the point where the deal falls apart because all the diligence has already been performed. It's just a matter of coordinating those final details. Once you've gotten that letter of approval, everything checks out, everybody's happy with the terms, you schedule your closing, and you close out this deal. What could you expect in a typical closing, and what do we mean by close out the deal? The shares of the company are transferred to whatever the holding company is going to be, or the assets are officially transferred and repossessed at that time. Checks are cut, wires are done, all the paperwork is signed off. The officials record everything so that they record that the loan was generated, the loan exists, what assets are guaranteeing that loan, if ever there needs to be some sort of repossession process. So all those things are handled at the time of closing. Don't let it stress you out. If you got to that point, then you pretty much are going to move forward. Most deals don't die at the closing table. They die typically in the due diligence process. So if you've gone through this and you actually have transacted on a business, once you've done it one time, you get to realize that, hey, this is not that hard. It's a lot like I said, investing in real estate. The first house that you purchase, everything is new, everything is different. Your due diligence process is stressful. Getting your mortgage is stressful. But once you've done it once, you're sharper and sharper for the next time. So if you want to build out a book of impressive businesses, this is the pathway to do it. After these 8 not so simple steps, you are the proud owner of a profit-generating business. Remember, try to keep this process analogous to buying familiar things like a home or a car. The process is virtually the same, and it's up to you to think big and execute on this idea. If you like how I approach teaching and explaining topics, working directly with me may just be what you need to get yourself on the right track. As I mentioned earlier, I now have limited slots for affordable coaching sessions. Book a session with me using the Calendly link in the description, and let's get to know each other and start to hack your life. Thanks for joining me here on ENTP Life. If you made it this far, you better like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me rank on YouTube and other people discover this content. Once again, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next installment of ENTP Life. Take care.